Greetings, my friend. I am Walter the Jester. Recently, I was binging latest videos by Charlie Moist Critical and came across the one in which he mentioned that Gandhi Tartakovsky has made a new cartoon. I haven't heard this name mentioned anywhere in ages, so I immediately rushed to check it out. Sadly, it turned out to be a steaming pile of dog shit. Pun intended, because it was basically a cartoon about a bunch of horny, ugly dogs humping legs and telling very unfunny ass jokes. It made me very sad, because Genndy Tartakovsky is a person responsible for creation of bangers, such as Dexter's Laboratory, Powerpuff Girls, Clone Wars, the hand-drawn ones from like 2003, and of course, Samurai Jack. He was the soul and spirit of Cartoon Network I grew up with, and his legacy is cemented in collective subconscious as possibly the most beloved TV series in the history of American animation. It's a shame to see what aging does to such creative powerhouses as Gandhi. After finding out what he's up to now, I had to wash this cold and bitter wave of sadness off of myself, to not fall to the depth of dark depressive pit of sorrow. And I didn't find any better way than to watch one of his timeless classics. My weapon of choice to fight this sadness was Samurai Jack. And man, that was a right choice. Last time I watched Samurai Jack was more than 20 years ago. It was at my grandma's place, God's rest her soul. She had satellite TV that had non translated Cartoon Network in English, and I remember the process of watching it as if it was yesterday. The CRT TV in the corner of the bedroom, me sitting on a carpet glued to a screen, the aroma of borscht cooking at the kitchen, and the excitement to talk about latest episodes with other kids from my school that watched it just like me. Obviously, I didn't remember much details, just the basic plot, main characters, and how cool it was. Rewatching it now, I couldn't believe it was shown on Cartoon Network at all. It's nothing like modern sanitized titles like Steven's Universe, full of political propaganda. It's a brutal, epic hero's journey about a man that was destined in his childhood to defeat possibly the most despicable villain in history of Western animation that came from outer space aiming to take over the whole world to turn it into a dystopian surveillance state dictatorship and rule it with an iron fist. If you're not familiar with the basic plot of Samurai Jack, it goes like this. There's a villain named Aku, an incredibly powerful cosmic creature that consists of pure darkness, possesses ability to shapeshift in various forms and change size, invincible to human weapons. Not many dare to oppose him, and those who dare usually end up dead or enslaved. Our protagonist is a child in a family of brave Japanese shogun that managed to incapacitate a coup in a fight with the help of a magic sword made on his request by the mountain monks, the only weapon in the world that can hurt him. However, Aku came back and attacked Shogun's palace, taking Shogun hostage. Following the plan prepared in advance, Jack's mother took the child and the sword and fled from palace, taking them both to a safe, distant place. Then they traveled around the world, and young Jack was trained by the greatest masters in all kinds of martial arts and fencing techniques, as well as spiritual disciplines, until he grew up and ventured on a quest to free his father, in which he succeeded, almost killing Aku in the process. But he was sucker punched at the last moment and sent with a spell to distant future, when Aku already established his dictatorship all over the world. Now he has to find a way to travel back to the past and defeat Aku for good, and he's going to search for it for 5 seasons, meeting various characters, taking on side quests, and trying his best to make sense of a time period he doesn't belong to. Samurai Jack is a brutal cartoon. I would say it goes as brutal as it possibly can, being a show made for kids. It has no obvious gore, otherwise, it couldn't run on Cartoon Network at all. But Gendy Tartakovsky wasn't that simple. He thought through a bunch of clever workarounds. For example, most of the enemies our protagonist has to fight are robotic, but they have various liquids flowing inside of them, like oil and such. And when you make the insides of the robot red and filled with liquids, you get yourself something that isn't gore technically, but looks just as authentic. And there's a lot of it. There is so much fighting in this show, it can put some gory seinen anime titles to shame. Battle scenes can last for more than half of an episode, and, unlike most of the anime, fights are mostly done without any talking. And it adds to the experience because fighting choreography is so goddamn impressive. You don't want it to be interrupted by characters like shouting attacks at each other. I found myself so entranced and glued to the screen during each battle that it felt like my childhood all over again. As a former 10-year-old boy myself, I can confidently say that this is exactly what every 10-year-old boy wants to see on screen. I mentioned anime not just by accident. The show obviously draws a lot of inspiration from this medium, both in terms of storytelling techniques, very uncharacteristic of Western cartoons, and in terms of animation itself, utilizing anime's very economical and efficient approach to framing and animating stuff, but at the same time, it takes advantage of bigger budget and longer production time, resulting in an anime like product, but many times smoother and with a lot more FPS that looks fantastic and has very unique and minimalistic art style, blending serious and goofy, grim and comedic in a very authentic and balanced way. If we're talking inspirations, this show features nearly every exciting historical thing ever existed. It has Vikings, Shaolin monks, brave Scottish Highlanders, ancient Egyptians, 300 Spartans, cowboys, you name it. And it connects surprisingly well together with sci-fi and futuristic themes because of nature of this dystopian future depicted in the story. Developed urban areas like big cities and main trade hubs have flying cars and futuristic technology all over them. And they feel very like cyberpunkish in a high tech, low life kind of sense, while more rural areas mostly live like all of that doesn't even exist, stuck in medieval or even in some instances, ancient times. Despite all the borrowings both from human history and from famous sci fi titles, this show never fails in originality because of how masterfully all the elements play off of each other. Even when you see a blatant homage to Star Wars in the form of a cutthroat sailing on some old ass ship that looks exactly like a Rhodian bounty hunter, it doesn't look like an out of place primitive member berry, because it's executed in a very tasteful manner and makes sense in the context. Modern show directors could learn a lot from Samurai Jack. There is another thing I've noticed while rewatching that for some reason never occurred to me as a kid. Some character designs, plays on perspective, bits of animation here and there, mostly subtle visual stuff, seemed oddly familiar to me because it had this Slavic, almost classic Soviet flair to it, more than any other Western cartoon could ever have. I got curious, and I did something I've never done before. I checked Gandhi Tartakovsky's Wikipedia page, and I've got my answer on where is this coming from in an instant. Turns out Gandhi's real name is Gennady Borisovich Tartakovsky. He's a Russian American, and there's no doubt that another huge pool of inspiration for him to draw from were bangers of classic Soviet animation like Treasure Island, Dr. Aybolit, Mystery of the Third Planet, most of which, by the way, were made in Kiev and produced by Ukrainian Jews, as well as goofy early Russian stuff like Adventures of Captain Pronin. What can I say? A man brought only best things from the old country along with himself, and kudos to him for that. There's not really that much to say about our protagonist. He's a very classic and traditional hero that would appeal to a very broad male audience. One of the interesting things is that we don't really know his name throughout the entirety of the show, and it's definitely not Jack. Surprise, surprise! The name Jack was given to him on arrival to the future by a bunch of local teenagers that were commenting on his moves when he had to dodge some flying cars during an epic fall from a very tall height. And in their slang, it's basically just meant like, dude.
Yo, Jack, that was some awesome show!
I never peer to pump moves like that, Jack.
Word! Jack was all ricochetically jumpadelic!
He immediately accepted it as his name and just rolled with it ever since. He is a brave and skilled warrior that radiates honor and determination, completely intolerant to any forms of injustice and absolutely incapable of letting innocent people suffer. And these traits are frequently exploited by bad actors of the future world as weaknesses. Juxtaposition of his righteousness against the vile nature of the world poisoned by Aku, where deception, greed, mistrust, and paranoia are the go to instruments of survival, creates perfect conflict that makes him seem naive and gullible at times. But he learns a lot along the way in a pretty decent character arc, and his core values make him very resistant to corruption by overall hellish landscape of society traumatized by centuries of dictatorship. He's an easy figure to root for and to aspire to. Now, Aku is a banger of a villain. He's not complicated in his motivation at all. Overall, basic conflict in Samurai Jack is very cut and dry. Aku is a part of cosmic force of evil. He likes to oppress people and rule over them, and that's basically what he does. He doesn't care who gets hurt in the process because of his actions. As a matter of fact, he likes when somebody gets hurt, and he doesn't discriminate at all. Men, women, children, robots, various creatures, anything goes as long as he is satisfied and entertained. All he cares about is staying in power and getting amused by suffering of others. A perfect, sadistic, self serving tyrant. What makes him interesting, though, is that he is both the king and the jester in a neat, horrifying package. At times, he gets comedic to a point of being almost a parody of himself. Like that one time when he tried to brainwash a crowd of young kids by telling them propaganda bedtime stories about how Samurai Jack is actually the villain, but failed miserably to connect with them in any meaningful way, and it thrusted him into a state of powerless rage. Such moments show very clearly that he's not actually loved or even respected by his people, that he inevitably needs terror to rule over them. The only ones who cooperate with him willingly are either robots, scumbags, or people caught up in desperate situations, often created by his own rule. His plans often fail because of how disconnected he is from the basics of understanding human nature. He systematically underestimates the power of community and what helping each other and self organizing can actually achieve. Like he's blind to all emotions but fear, greed, and anger. This blind spot nuance reminded me constantly about another banger villain, Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg from The Fifth Element by Luc Besson. But with an exception, that Aku doesn't answer to any higher power. He's basically pig specimen of his own kind, with nobody up the food chain, which makes him even more terrifying. And speaking of terrifying, when he gets to action, be it terrorizing Earth population or confronting Jack, I don't need to suppress disbelief too hard to feel a chilling sense of danger. Like, I know it's a show made for kids and Jack will be fine, generally speaking, but every time Aku attacks, I just go, holy shit, this is intense. Fighting a villain that can transform himself into whatever the hell he wants, whose only weakness is your sword, is no joke. Believe me on that. Both sides of his character are spiced up real good by how he is drawn and animated. His color palette adds to it as well, and that's a very interesting and sophisticated choice, by the way, because they are exact colors that angry forms of ancient pagan and tantric gods were depicted with, to look as imposing and scary as possible, and it gets the job done very well. I'm currently almost finished season 4, so for now I observed Aku and Jack stuck in a perpetual stalemate. In every encounter, Jack nearly defeats Aku, but then he usually transforms into something small or uses some kind of trickery and escapes. Season 5 is rumored to be much worse than previous seasons, and there's a major time gap between them. First 4 seasons came out in in early to mid 2000s, and season 5 came out in 2017. And observing the obvious creative decline of the author, I tend to believe those rumors. But I haven't seen it yet. So at the moment, I have no idea how their conflict resolves and how the show ends. Maybe when I finish it, I'll share my thoughts about it, but for now, I can confidently tell you this. In recent years, we have plenty of wonderful animated series. We had Arcane, we had a boatload of banger anime like Frieren, Attack on Titan, and many others. But they don't make them like Samurai Jack anymore. It's an artifact of an era long gone that hits very different to any modern animation. So original and unique, it's almost unbelievable. If you've never watched it, I strongly suggest you do, because it's such a banger, there's no way you'll regret this decision. If you, like myself, watched it a long time ago and barely remember it, it's absolutely worth rewatching in 2025, because it did age like fine wine, a timeless classic begging to be revisited. And that's about all I had to say about Samurai Jack.